what's up, CLC? So glad that you are with us for Between Sermons today. Really glad to be able to hang out with you for just a little bit. What we're going to do today is we're going to kind of recap a little bit of what we preached on Sunday, my wife and I, about conflict, add a little bit of detail in some areas that we just didn't have the time to be able to go through. In fact, we've got some questions we want to teach you to be able to ask yourself in point number 3 that I think is really going to be a game changer for a lot of you when it comes to conflict and resolution and healthy relationships. But before we dive into all that, I want to let you know that you can ask us a question. My sister is going to be monitoring the chat, so everybody say hi to Jen. Say hi, Jen.
Hi, Jen.
And so she's going to text me anytime you guys have a question, because this is actually live right now. And then at the end of kind of our kind of recap, we're going to answer any questions that we can. We've already got a couple that were submitted on Sunday. We'll be going through those as well. And so make sure you jump into the chat, say hi to Jen, and then give us a question that you might have. And then second thing I want to tell you is that in a lot of relationships, with a lot of conflict and different things that are going on, especially for marriages, but really with parenting and with kids and different things, we have resources here at CLC to help you beyond just a sermon you hear on Sunday and a conversation that we're going to have here, because a lot of this, honestly, is going to be very one-sided. We're going to be sharing from our perspective. But there's a lot of things that go on in our lives that we just need somebody to have dialogue with, back and forth. And so we have a counseling department here at CLC that is equipped to help you in your marriages, to help you with your kids. And so if you feel like you're going through some really unhealthy conflict right now, or maybe there's a situation that you know you need to have conflict with, you know that you need to have a conversation, and you're just not sure how to approach it, and you're struggling, and you really need help, you need somebody to talk to, please let our counseling department know. There's 2 ways you can do that. You can email them directly at counseling@clc.tv. That's counseling@clc.tv. Or you can actually text the word counseling to the number 708-998-4516, and somebody from the counseling department will reach back out to you. And again, we want to offer as much help as we can as pastors, but at some point you may need additional support, additional help, and so we've got a team of people ready to serve you in that capacity.
And that is really important, because I think that a lot of times there's just so much that we could say from here, and it is, you try to help as many people as possible, so you try to make this a little more general, but you might need help that is specifically tailored for you, with your own issues that you have, things that maybe you have been struggling with, that it is not necessarily just this pandemic type of issue, like it is not just that your spouse is driving you nuts because now you're all together, but it is something that it has been happening for years, and you don't know how to get out of this situation, and you don't know how to even start getting help. And I think that that's where the counseling is really, really, really important, because it is not as easy as follow 1, 2, 3 and everything is all good. So you might need that extra resource, and I'm just so glad that we have that available for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And please, there's no shame in asking for help in that way. Every marriage is going to go through a place where you just need some support, you need some help. Every relationship, there's going to come a moment where, we just don't have the wisdom on our own, and we just need somebody to talk to. So please reach out to the counseling department if you need that kind of help. Ask us a question right now in the chat. We'll be getting to those in about 10-15 minutes. But just to kind of recap and give you a little bit more information. So on Sunday, we taught 5 steps in having healthy confrontation. And the first step was to ask God for wisdom. Before you try and approach it with your own wisdom, your own intelligence, what you think is best, we take the time to talk to God, because God's pretty awesome. And Scripture even says that if you need wisdom, ask Him, and He is so ready to give it to you. And so ask God for wisdom. Now, this is a principle that I had to learn early on, and really what ended up happening in my life is that I was on both sides of really bad confrontation. I mean, some of the worst possible examples of confrontation. I experienced it from both sides. So I remember I was 16 years old, and I was a manager at Blockbuster Video. It was my first leadership position, and I was given this task of confronting an employee that was not doing a good job. And so at 16 years old, I try and have a business confrontation, and man, was I the wrong person for the job. Like, it went so poorly that this person who was actually the same age as me actually ended up crying and ran out of the store just in tears because I wrecked her, and I didn't know that I had done anything wrong, and I couldn't identify what I had done wrong. I did what my bosses told me to do. I confronted an employee that wasn't doing a good job, and it wrecked her. And then turn around, and I was the recipient of that kind of conflict. In fact, I don't know if you wanted to share a little bit of your experience being on the wrong side of that.
I think that it is very important to understand that there's times that you're blindsided by the conflict. You know, when you don't know that it is coming, when you don't, for things that I thought that we were good, and I ended up having my position taken over by somebody else. And they said, okay, and now all of this stuff that you were overseeing is going to be going to that person. And it was never a conversation prior. It was never, hey, I don't think that this happened correctly. And I remember leaving that place defeated. And I just left that place just feeling like, I don't know what happened. All I know is that I was demoted, and I thought that we were good. I thought that we were friends. I thought that everything was going well. Apparently it wasn't. And then like 2 seconds later, I have this person even come to the office and start yelling at me some more. And start saying, if you're not going to be a team player, then you cannot be here. And I was just like, I don't even know what's going on here. So it is very important for us as the ones that are wanting to address an issue, to ask God, how am I supposed to do this? Like, what am I supposed to say? What is the tone that I'm supposed to use? Because all of that makes a whole package. It is not just about addressing a situation. It's how you approach it. Where do you go? When do you do it? And just who else needs to be involved? Like, has to be everybody in, or it is just the two of us? Let's talk about this. And I think that asking God for question is just vital.
Yeah, and so I was actually there the day that Sol had this confrontation with her boss, and I just sat in shock, and I was remembering how poorly I had confronted somebody, and I'm watching how poorly this is being confronted, and I'm remembering experiences that I had that were just ugly and nasty, and I didn't love it. And I remember us talking on the way home that day, and we said, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a better way to address issues and have conflict in relationships, both in between husband and wife, with kids, with parents, but also in the workplace. And so I just remember we began praying, and this is really where this point came to us from, is that we needed to ask God for wisdom, because we could see in Scripture, and if you pay attention in Scripture, the New Testament, the Gospels are filled with Jesus having confrontations with people, right? Sometimes he was on the receiving end as the Pharisees would come and confront him, and sometimes he was actually the one delivering the confrontation as he would pull Peter aside and say, come on, man. And you could see Jesus handle these confrontations so beautifully. And so we said, you know what? Instead of me trying to figure out it with my wisdom, God, I need yours, because clearly you're better at this than I am. And so I think that is kind of the starting point for all of us, is to go and ask for his wisdom. And really, I've seen time and time and time again how just that one step has made the biggest difference, and it has saved so many relationships that I've been a part of.
And even for me with my son Jaden specifically, he is a very sensitive guy. And there have been times that I am just ticked over something that he's doing, or over the fact that he is just so sensitive. Like I get like upset because he's being just crying. You're crying again? Seriously? So in my wisdom, I feel like I need to say something. And I have done that. I have gone like, Jaden, you gotta stop this. And it results in more tears and in hurt. And then I leave the place thinking, man, I really blew it as a mom, Like instead of listening to him, I'm just yelling at him, and now he's crying, and now I'm crying, and this just went terribly wrong. And I had to learn that before I approach him, I have to ask God to help me. I have to ask God, how can I address this situation that it just seems to be repeating and repeating and repeating? How can I talk to him in a way that he will be able to receive it and that it will not be felt like an attack? Because that's what happens with conflict. When you are not being wise in how to say things, the other person just thinks that you're attacking them. And that's not what you want. So I have to learn this step so much with him that before I even open my mouth after something happens with him, I have to pray. Because I know that in his sensitive heart, I will just make more damage if I just go and say wherever I think that I need to say in the moment.
Yeah, that's huge. So remember, if you got questions, you can throw them in the chat right now. We're going to get to those in just a couple minutes. The second point that we had for you on Sunday was to make the first move and begin with what's my fault. Now, in making the first move, that was always a struggle for me. I definitely wanted to just kind of wait for things to blow over or just kind of wait for the other person to address the issue. But I realized that when I wouldn't confront a person, especially in the workplace, but even in relationships, if I wouldn't confront what wasn't working, I was essentially telling that other person that I care more about my comfort than I care about you. I care more about maintaining the status quo of the relationship than I really care about us being better together. And so I would rather avoid potentially awkward situations than actually help somebody else become all that God had created them to be. And that's a horrible place to be in. And that revelation for me, it really rocked my world, and it changed the way I approach things, because when I avoided confrontation, really, I was just being selfish. I wasn't really, and I would try and make excuses that, I don't want to hurt their feelings. But it wasn't their feelings that I was ultimately really worried about. It was my own. And so I've gotten to this point where I have to ask this question: do I care enough about the person, and do I care enough about the relationship to confront them, to actually have this confrontation moment, this conflict? And if you can honestly answer that question, I think it's going to make a big shift for you.
And you talked on Sunday about two different types of people with confrontation comes, the skunks, the skunks and the turtles. The skunks are the ones, that make us stink out of everything, and, they're going to tell it like it is, and they're going to speak their mind, and everybody will know that they are upset. Or there are some of us that are turtles, that we just retrieve, we hide, and we just try to make it like nothing is going on. And neither of those are healthy. I have always been that person, that is just trying to make it like it's all rainbows and butterflies and no big deal, like everybody's upset, and I'm like, no, we're not upset, we're happy, we love each other, it is not good. We have to be able to recognize the problem, figure it out, what is the part that we played in that problem, and being able to go and say, hey, this is what I did, and I am sorry for what I did, or for the way that I responded was not okay. I am sorry. And it takes so much from me personally to be able to do that, but it makes a whole difference in a relationship when you are able to own up to wherever you did, and when you are the first one to go and say something. Because when somebody else comes first and you're just responding, that's good if things are moving in the right direction. But I think that it is very important, and it just speaks volumes of who you are when you are the first one to go and say, hey, you are important to me. Our relationship is important to me, and I don't want this to end this way. So I'm going first, even if it's uncomfortable or if it's difficult or if I didn't even want it to. But here I am. I think that's just huge.
And there's a lot of vulnerability that is required to do something like that, which is another reason why we start by praying, so that we do have that openness and honestness. So number 3 for you was to listen for their hurt and their perspective. Now, this is the potential game changer for a lot of people. We didn't have time to include this into the message on Sunday, but in listening for their hurt and their perspective, so many times we approach conflict very one-sided. We just look at what it did to us or how we feel or how we've been affected, but we don't take the time to actually see from their perspective. And so there's 5 questions that you can can ask yourself before you go into a conflict that's really going to help you know if you need to apologize for something or if you need to own up to something right there at the start. And this is going to help you be able to accomplish step 2, where you're talking about beginning with what's my fault. But it really is going to also help you see from their perspective, okay? So here's the 5 questions for you. Number 1 is, have I been unrealistic? There's a lot of times, this is going to save you, especially in the workplace, but I can see this in marriages and even with your kids. Like, there are some times when we put a rule on our kids and we realize after the fact that we weren't being very realistic with what a 5-year-old can accomplish or what a 5-year-old can do. And so we may end up being frustrated and feel like we need to have a confrontation with our child because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. But maybe we're the ones that have been unrealistic. And it may be for you as a boss looking at your employees. Maybe there's something that you've asked them to do that it's really unrealistic. And you feel like you need to have this confrontation moment because they're not executing. But really, you don't. You really just need to adjust what you are expecting of them in that. Anything you would add to, number 1, have I been unrealistic?
I think that also you need to be able to identify if you have been unrealistic with yourself. Because there's a lot of times that you expect something from you that you cannot give. And that can cause problems in a relationship. And it has nothing to do with them, but what I was putting on me. Last night, actually, it happened because I have just been trying to just juggle everything. Like all of this stuff is in the air, and I'm trying to keep it all from falling. And I just feel like I'm Superwoman.
And I think you got hit in the head with a couple of the balls.
And all of these things start falling on my face. And all of a sudden, we finish dinner, and I am bawling, and I am crying, and I run out of the room, and everybody's like, what in the world just happened? And then I have my kids worried about me, coming to try to hug me, but they don't know if they should hug me, and it was just not good. And when I tried to express what actually was going on, we realized, and by we, I mean Brent, that I was expecting so much from me and thinking, I am failing at everything. Nothing is working. And he was like, that's not even true, But sometimes when you have those unrealistic expectations of you, you project those into other people. And then problems happen.
What I love about this story is the catalyst for everything was Jaden didn't eat his mushrooms.
So, see, kids, eat your vegetables. Then you make your parents happy.
Yeah, so we had a fun night in the McQuay household last night. But that's an awesome point, babe. So number 2, have I been insensitive? And usually I'm the guilty party in this. In fact, last night was probably a great realization of that.
We always joke that he has no heart.
Is it a joke, though?
Half truth,
So there are many times when, what you're doing to somebody else, really it stems from your insensitivity. Like in that moment last night, my wife was freaking out over something kind of silly, okay? Jaden didn't eat his mushrooms. Probably not the end of the world. But I needed in that moment to be sensitive to what was going on in her life because it was so much more than that. But if I had followed her out of the room to find her crying and in my insensitivity looked at her and said, this is stupid. You're crying because Jaden didn't eat mushrooms. Like, that would have created a new conflict that the McQuays would then need to be resolving last night. And so we really do need to be aware of our sensitivity, insensitivity. And number 3, have I been overly sensitive? Because I think that this is probably as equal a possible issue as being insensitive, is especially in today's culture of oversensitivity, I think. And so we need to ask that question.
We feel like everything is offensive and everything is a personal attack, when it is really not.
Yeah, there's some things that really didn't have anything to do with you, but you may be reading into a situation, you may be overreacting to a situation, you may simply be overly sensitive. Now, this one is for personal internal use, okay? This is not an accusation you throw at somebody else, okay? In your conflict resolution, you don't say, well, Brent said you're just being overly sensitive. No. Brent didn't say that. Brent said you personally were being overly sensitive.
That's why the question says, have I been overly sensitive.
Yeah, so don't use this as a what did you call it yesterday or on Sunday? A club, Don't use this
No
question
clubs.
as a club to beat up somebody else. This is for personal reflection. Am I the one that is being overly sensitive? And we really do need to ask that question. Number 4, the fourth question you need to ask is, have I been ungrateful? And I think that this one probably can play on both sides of just about any relationship, that there are times that we just take for granted the things that the other person has done. The hours, the time, the investment, the thought, the process that they've gone through. And sometimes we get so caught up in our own perspective and our own side that we have stopped being grateful for the things that they have been doing because we're so focused on maybe the one thing that they didn't do that we expected them to do. So question number 4 for you is, have I been ungrateful? And number 5, have I been over demanding? And I think this is another one that can affect you in any kind of relationship, even as parents with your kids, with employers and employees, and with husbands and wives. Have I been over demanding?
Other people might say nagging.
That's another way to put it.
know?
But in being over demanding, there may be a conflict that you're facing simply because you have put too much on the other person to ever be able to accomplish. And now you're upset because they haven't reached this level that you've expected them to reach. It's almost like you've placed them on this pedestal, and there's no possible chance that they're going to live up to those expectations. And so we need to be careful of being over demanding of people. But I really think those 5 questions, if you will ask those of yourself, it will shift your perspective to be able to see things through their lens, through their way of looking at things, because there is 2 sides to every conflict. It's not just your side, it's also their side. And so we need to be careful with that.
And when you ask those 5 questions of yourself before you approach a person, it can help you identify what it is that you need to own up to so that you can take step 2 and make the first step.
Awesome. So number 4, we're going to speak the truth tactfully. Now, something we didn't get a chance to talk about on Sunday is back in the Cold War days, Russia and the U.S.
Back in my day.
Back in your day. Wow, this is such a great day. There was this kind of a peace treaty of sorts that kind of carries over today, and that's that we recognize that weapons of mass destruction, nukes, needed to be off the table. Because if one person launched a nuke, the other person was going to launch a nuke, and before long, the world is over. And so there was this kind of mutual agreement between the U.S. and its allies and Russia and their allies that, look, as this conflict goes on, we're not gonna push that button because you can't undo that button. And so in the same way, there needs to be an agreement in your relationships, especially between husband and wife, but really even beyond that look, there are some weapons and really there's some words of mass destruction that we're just not going to use. These are off of the table. Now, when we're having conflict, we're not going to go there, okay? And so where is there? Well, the one for marriages that I say should be number 1 in any marriage is the word divorce. Like, the word divorce should just never enter the conversation, because we're going to work on this relationship because we do believe that it's more rewarding to resolve the conflict than it is to dissolve the relationship. And so the word divorce, we're just not going to use that as a weapon against each other.
I think that it's very important to fight fair, like to not just say things that that are going to trigger something in the other person. And that that if you say these words, man, you're really going to go there, and you're really going to prove your point.
And sometimes we kind of keep those words in our back pocket, like, okay, I'm going to pull this out. It's my trump card. I'm going to pull this out the moment the conversation starts leaning like they're going to win this argument. I'm going to pull this out because I know it's going to defeat them. Like, for a lot of couples, you're just like your mother.
Or what about, like, you're a terrible father? You have failed because your father failed you, so now you're failing to our kids.
Yeah, like, honestly, it's kind of, we joked about that first one, that you're just like your mother, because that's kind of a compliment for Sol. We actually like her mom. She's an awesome person. But you're a horrible father, I told Sol a few times, like, if you ever said that to me, it would destroy me. I would not recover from that, because being a father is so vital to who I am. It's so important to me, and being there for my kids is huge. So if there was ever a moment when she just said, you've neglected your kids, you're not a good father, any of that, it would destroy me.
And I think that something else that is that it can be very damaging to our relationship is when you have finally opened up, when you have finally being honest and transparent with this person, and you have told that person about things that have happened in your life or sins that you have committed that you have repented from, and that you have God to help you get into the other side. And then all of a sudden you are in a disagreement, and those things are brought up. And but you're the one to talk. You remember that you used to do this? And you're like, man, like I told you that in confidence. Like I told you that as a moment of transparency, and now you're using it against me. That is damaging.
Yeah, that's a word of mass destruction. There's an old joke that said two guys were talking about their spouse in a conflict, and they said, man, anytime I argue with my wife, she just gets so historical with me. And the other guy said, don't you mean hysterical? And he said, no, she gets historical. She brings up everything I have ever done in my life. And so we just need to be careful of things like that, especially if it's a conflict that you've already resolved in the past. Especially as Sol mentioned, if it was a vulnerability, you were open and honest, you shared a past struggle or a failure or an issue or an abuse or a pain that you experienced in your past, you can't expect to use that as a weapon in the future. That's just not healthy. So we need to watch out for those words of mass destruction. We need to speak the truth in love. We need to speak that truth with tact.
Kindness.
Yeah. And so number 5, and then we're going to dive into some questions. Number 5, focus on reconciliation, not resolution.
Yeah, it is so important to understand that it is not about who can win the blame game. Like you did, it was your fault, but you started it. It is about reestablishing the relationship. It is about getting reconnected and being able to heal that relationship that could be hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. The goal of the conflict is to come out on the other side with a healthier relationship than you went in. The blame game is always just going to be a waste of time. And really, in that game, there are no winners. And so we need to be focused on reconciliation, that the relationship is what's most important in this conflict. So those are the 5 points that we had for you.
And just the last thing is that just remember that when you are in this conflict, you are in the same team. You are trying to accomplish the same thing, which is having a good relationship again. So it is not that you are against him or that he is against you. It is that you are fighting to have this relationship go from pain and brokenness to wholeness and being in a healthy position again.
So we had a couple of questions that were already submitted, and then if you have more questions, you can drop them in the comments right now. Jen would love to get those questions, send them over to us. But a question we got on Sunday was, how do you reconcile with someone that doesn't want to be reconciled?
Oh, that's hard. That is hard because all of the stuff that we've been talking about today and that we talked about on Sunday really is a personal thing. It is something that it is for you to do. But you cannot control how the other person is going to react to it. You cannot force somebody to want to do something. So that is very, very difficult. You can only do what you can do.
Yeah. I think you're right on the right track. We talked about how it's always more rewarding to resolve the conflict than dissolve a relationship. But I will add to that it takes 2 to tango. Right? You know that. Like, you can only do your part. They have to be willing and capable of doing their part. And so here's the thing that you have to understand with this is you cannot force reconciliation. You can't hold somebody down and say, we're going to be reconciled whether you like it or not. Right? You can't force them into this. Maybe they need more time. Maybe they need an encounter with God. Whatever they need at that point, you trying to force the situation is going to do more harm than good. So you do your part. You follow these 5 steps that we've given you. You pray. You ask God for wisdom. You follow the wisdom that he gives you. and you make the first move. You begin with what's your fault, and you look for their hurt, and you listen for their hurt and their perspective, and then you speak your truth tactfully, speak the truth in love, and you look to reestablish that relationship. You look for reconciliation. But at that point, if they are not with you, you've done what you can do, and it's time for you to probably move on and to continue praying for the relationship, praying for the situation, but you can only do what you can do. It does take two people to make a conflict and to resolve a conflict.
Because something that you need to understand is that it takes work. Keeping a relationship healthy, it's work. It is worth it, but it is work.
So some people make it harder work than others.
So if you are not willing to work for it, if somebody is not willing to go the extra mile and to try again and try again and try again, you cannot make the outcome. So the only thing that you can do is do your part and believe that God will help you with the outcome.
That's good. Another question that we got was that I'm having a really hard time in letting go of all the hurt that this other person has put me through. How do I work on this relationship when in my heart I don't even know if I want the relationship anymore? Man, that's a very loaded question, and I really do think that this is probably one that we're going to try and address it, but you may want to reach out to our counseling department to kind of help you walk through this, because with limited details and limited information, to be specific for you in this moment is going to be challenging. But what I really want to let you know is that if you've been abused, if you've been hurt physically or emotionally, that may not be a relationship that you need to continue, at least not in the same level or the same type of relationship. Maybe that's a dating relationship that needs to just become an acquaintance kind of relationship. But anytime that you've been abused or hurt, like I can't stress this enough, you need to seek help. You need to talk to somebody. Be able to have a face-to-face, a conversation with them to give you some relief in that moment. But if there's a relationship, I think I would probably also say this, that reconciling a relationship doesn't always mean that the relationship remains in the same level.
True. That is so true.
So you can be reconciled with your ex-husband, but that doesn't mean you remarry your ex-husband. Does that make sense for you? And this is difficult because it's very specifics of individual cases, but just know that reconciliation for each relationship may look differently. It may just be the fact that there's healing in that relationship, that when you look at that person or you think about that person, there's no longer this pain or anger or frustration.
Or that if you find them at the store, you will not hide in aisle 3.
Yeah, that's probably a great litmus test of, have you really reconciled the relationship? Can you be in the grocery store together without causing a scene? And so not every relationship is going to be reconciled into the same type of relationship. It may just be that, you know what?
That is good.
We've been hurt by each other and we've forgiven, but there's still so much pain there. There's so much history there that it's just not healthy for us to continue this relationship in the same way. And so we just want to give you that clarity. How about for conflict resolution with your kids? For preteen and teen specifically.
Hide.
So right in that difficult age of like 11, 12, 13. Sol, what do you got?
I think that something that you need to do with your kids is give them clear expectations. What it is expected from them to do, what it is that they are supposed to be, like the targets that they're supposed to be hitting, and what will be the consequence if that doesn't happen. Because when our kids have those boundaries, when our kids know what it is that mom and dad expect from me, what it is that I'm supposed to be doing or contributing in the house, and I know that if I don't do this, then I will get this privilege removed, or this, or I cannot go outside, or I don't know, wherever it is, you don't get your allowance that week or wherever. Then they know what it is expected and what will happen if they fail to meet those expectations. Because when we're just trying to correct them in the moment and give them a punishment in the moment, then it can get really, really crazy, because then it is out of frustration and out of anger, and then they will receive it that way, And when you're angry, when you are in the midst of the moment, you say things that you would probably never really even do because they are so unrealistic. I remember one time my kids were just not behaving. It was just one of those days that the boys were just fighting and they were just being mean to each other. And my husband had it. So he just came and he's like, you do that one more time and I will take your PlayStation and your TV forever. And I was like, you will not do a forever. Like, I mean, 7 and 10. Yeah, it's not going to happen at forever, you know. So when you actually know, if I do this, that is going to be my punishment, then they know that that was a rule set up, not just because you were upset or because you were angry, but because that was the agreement. So when I broke the agreement, I have to take the consequence that was already set up for me. So it kind of detaches the punishment from it's just that they don't love me or they are angry or, they always just get so crazy. They already knew it. So they knew that breaking this rule will have this consequence.
Yeah, and I think that's something that can't be understated is the fact that kids need boundaries. Kids need discipline. Kids need the rules. And when you don't discipline, you're doing more damage to them than when you do discipline. And so for me, it's all about the follow through. And yes, I will say that there have been moments when I've made some unrealistic statements, and we've been working on that. But really, if you can clearly define what is expected and what are the consequences, then you don't have to get angry in the moment. You can just be calm and remind them, hey, we had this agreement and you broke it. So here's the consequences that we agreed upon. And so it kind of takes a lot of the in the moment emotion out of it. And you can still be upset as a parent. You can still be disappointed. But at least in that confrontation, it's a lot healthier when you know what's expected. It's clearly defined. It's written out. It's spelled out for them. And I think the kids really need that.
And I also, something that I do with my kids when I'm trying to talk to them about wherever they have done or wherever situation that might arise, the first thing that I tell them is, I love you, and I want you to understand that I love you, but this that happened is unacceptable. So that they understand that I'm not doing this because they're bad kids or anything like that. That there's love, but within the boundaries of that love, this specific issue or I'm looking for a word and I cannot find it, but just
what is it in Spanish?
Like actions, like acción, wherever you're doing right now, it is not acceptable. So we need to be able to calmly communicate that, but always making them understand the love. And I always try to finish with a prayer. Once we finish talking about what it wasn't okay for them to do this or to say that or to behave this way, and I'm like, I ask them, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you agree with what I'm saying? And once we kind of finish the whole conversation, we pray that God will help us be better next time. We cannot do anything about what has already happened, but we can only ask God for the future. So always just tell them, next time, respond this way. Next time, do it this way. Next time, don't hit your brother. That will be very good. So just always help them to see the future and not just stay in the past and all of that you did is bad and you always do bad, because then they will always feel like, well, I always do bad. I will always make the wrong choice. No, but when you tell them next time, do it this way. Next time, respond with kind words. Next time, don't do that. And let's pray that God will help you the next time, because it's going to come a next time. So I think that is very important.
Yeah, I think that's great. We're going to try and squeeze one more question in here, but we're a little bit over time already, so we'll have to hit this one kind of quick. But it's kind of the opposite of that question, not how do you resolve conflict with your kids, but as an adult, how do you resolve conflict with your parents?
Yes, Mom. Yes, Dad. No, I think that it's very important to be respectful. Just remember that they are your parents. And they are not always right. We are not always right. we don't always know what to do or how to do it. But respecting our parents is biblical. You know, the Bible tells us that that's what we need to do. We need to honor our mother and father. And that's the one commandment that has a promise, because if you do it, you will have a better life. Like, that's what the Bible says. So always remember to be respectful. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything, but that means that when you are addressing your parents, you're not yelling at your parents. You're not calling them like, you're just so dumb, Dad. You know, like, you approach them with respect. And I think that is very important, especially today. Like, you see so many kids, and it just breaks my heart to see how many kids just feel comfortable talking back to their parents in a way that I think that I would have lost all of my teeth if I even tried with my mom. You know, like, and I know that I'm like that old lady, like, back in my day, I could not do that. But it is the truth, you know, like, I think that we had a level of respect before that is being lost today. So I think that it is very important for all of us that are kids, that still have parents, to be able to respect them, you know, to understand that they might not know everything and they might be doing their best or maybe not, but the respect still has to be there.
Yeah, so I would just add to that, just wrap everything in humility. That we even said on Sunday, you know, come with a humble heart. But if you're going to be approaching your parents, whether you're in your 40s and they're in their 60s or whatever, they are still your parents. And so there is this level of respect and humility that you need to approach the situation with. And then, I hate to say it like this, but just follow the 5 steps. Like, those 5 steps that we've given you, there's a reason why we've given those to you, that they really do help. And it doesn't matter if it's a conflict with your boss. It doesn't matter if it's conflict with your spouse or a conflict with your parents or a conflict with your grandparents. Whoever it is, these 5 steps still apply. And so just kind of walk through each of those. But specifically with your parents, make sure that there's a level of humility and respect as you go to approach them. Yeah. All right. Hey, this was a lot of fun. We went a little bit longer than we were expecting to, but thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for asking a few questions. And we're going to be continuing our Reset series this Sunday. But before then, we'll love to see you for Worship Wednesday tomorrow at noon. God bless. Love you guys.
Bye.